Changed forever when I was diagnosed with cancer. At the time, I was 42, a wife, a mum to 3 awesome kids, one 19 and 2 15-year-olds. I was running my own business. My life was busy and full, and then suddenly everything changed. 18 months prior to my diagnosis, I'd had a routine screening that showed some mild changes. I was referred to a specialist where a biopsy was taken, the results were okay, and the doctor said it was nothing to worry about. Only minor changes, just come back in 12 months. I was so relieved and grateful, I dodged a bullet. I put it to the back of my mind, but in my heart, I felt like something was not quite right. I was having persistent headaches and fatigues and night sweats which were brushed off as perimenopause. Moving forward, COVID hit, my older sister passed away, and my life at the time was incredibly difficult. I found any excuse to avoid the reality, and I delayed my follow-up by 6 short months. I regret that, but I trusted the doctors, and unfortunately that was a mistake. On Thursday the 16th of January 2022, I got the call to confirm that I had cancer. I took a few minutes, I sat in my office, and then I went straight back to work. I really didn't know what to do. Looking back, I wish I'd trusted my instincts, and I wish I'd done things differently. I spent a lot of time blaming myself, living with regret, and boy was I angry, not only with the doctors, but myself. But I realised in time that wouldn't help. This wasn't going to go away, and I had to face it head on. What mattered now was moving forward and making a plan. The next part was a whirlwind. One appointment after another, one test after another, blood tests, CTs, MRIs, PET scans. I had some understanding of the process as my sister had been through breast cancer earlier, and I'd been by her side for many of her appointments. But the waiting was hard. I wanted the treatment to start now, and I wanted the cancer gone. I remained hopeful that it would be an early stage diagnosis, maybe surgery, a couple of weeks off work, then move on. How wrong I was. On Tuesday, the 25th of January, I attended Peter Mac in Melbourne. This was when I got my staging. Stage 3C, a 7-centimetre tumour that had grown into my uterus through my pelvic wall. I was so defeated. This was not what I'd planned for. This meant surgery was not an option. This meant treatment, chemo and radiation. I was fortunate to have the option of doing my treatment in Bendigo at the Cancer Centre. We had friends there, and they generously let us stay in their apartment so we didn't have to travel every day. The fear I felt when I got my diagnosis was overwhelming. At first, I couldn't even say the word cancer. I remember the sleepless nights, the moments when I couldn't breathe, and the deep worry for my family. I didn't want to cause them any pain. But in the middle of the fear, I found my faith and my strength. That was my turning point. I set goals for myself. I wanted to be there for my kids' 18th and 21st birthdays, to spare my mum from any more grief. My mum, by the way, is one of the strongest, most courageous people I've ever known. I wanted to travel, to see my 50th birthday at least, and to one day be a grandma. Those goals and the support of my amazing family and friends gave me strength and purpose. My treatment was grueling. 6 weekly cycles of chemotherapy, 25 sessions of daily radiation, and 3 rounds of brachytherapy. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, you can Google it to find out. This was all under COVID restrictions, which meant I was on my own. I was away from my kids for weeks at a time, and even though they were old enough to fend for themselves, I felt like I was letting them down. Mother's guilt. After the first week, I was able to travel home for the weekend. I'd been looking forward to getting home all week. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. On the first night, I woke in excruciating pain. I got up feeling so sick that I went to the bathroom, where I woke on the floor sometime later. An ambulance was called, and I went back to Bendigo Hospital, where I was admitted. I received 4 blood transfusions over the next week until I was stable enough to return home the following weekend. The side effects were brutal. Sickness, fatigue, early menopause, and the emotional grief was just as hard. The time spent sitting in waiting rooms, watching sick people, some old, some young, all just as scared as me. It was tough. If I was going to die, I didn't want to spend my last days sitting around in waiting rooms. I had to dig deep. I had to focus. I wasn't going to die. I had goals. I had a plan. I had to pick myself up over and over again. I had to look forward even when it felt impossible. When I finished my final brachytherapy treatment on April 12, the scan showed no cancer. I cried tears of relief. It was over, and I just wanted to go home and forget this whole bloody experience. So I went back to my old hectic lifestyle and pretended like nothing had happened. I buried deep the fear and the trauma, and I didn't acknowledge that I'd been given a second chance. Then, just 2 very short months later, I started waking in the night, drenched in sweat, living with life-interrupting headaches, and I knew in my heart my cancer had returned. The doctors suggested it was likely just menopause, but referred me for a PET scan just to be sure. Then, just days after my son's 16th birthday, I got the phone call to confirm that yes, there was cancer. It was in 8 lymph nodes. And no, there was no chance of a cure. All they could offer was palliative care to slow the cancer and keep me alive as long as possible. I was now stage 4 and terminal. What did I do? I went to the gym. The odds were against me. Based on the statistics, only a 6 to 12 month survival rate for recurrence. But I refused to let that define me. This time, I knew I had to face the traumas I'd buried and to find peace and forgiveness to truly heal. This was my wake-up call. It was my last chance. This was when I went back to Melbourne. I met with an amazing oncologist who, as it turned out, has family in Euroa, and I personally know them. I walked into her office believing she was going to give me a death sentence. But she very confidently said, no, this is not end-of-life treatment. We have options. I cried. My second round of treatment was even tougher. 2 different chemotherapy drugs, 8 hours in the chair. And those who know me well will understand that sitting still for that long was going to be a challenge for me. This was followed by 2 years of 3 weekly immunotherapy treatments. This treatment was Keytruda. It was still only in trial stage for cervical cancer, but in my luck, I'd missed the trial, which meant out of pocket. So the treatment would cost $11,000 per treatment, but it was capped at $70,000. Lucky me. With only a 20% chance of success, I was scared. It was a huge gamble, but Carl, my husband, didn't hesitate. He said, yes, let's do it. It was at that time a close friend said to me, yeah, but there's a 2 in front of that 0, just remember that. And although he probably doesn't quite realise the impact of this statement, it rang true, and those words have stuck with me every step of the way. Thank you, Dan. From that moment, I refused to be a statistic. I was fit, healthy, strong, and really bloody determined. With this treatment, I lost my hair. I battled constant sickness and pain that I could not describe. I dealt with the ongoing effects of the medically induced menopause. It was brutal, and at times all I could do was sit and cry. But through the pain and fear, I kept running, and I kept training at the gym, bald head and all. I can't begin to explain how confronting the bald was, and how exposed I felt the first time I ventured out without a wig or a hat. But the training made me feel strong. I took back control by diving deep into research. I stumbled across a book called How to Starve Cancer. The author had exactly the same diagnosis as me, and this book became my Bible. I read it and reread it over and over. I learned about alternative therapies, diets, and supplements to complement my treatment. I also did a lot of research into how to boost the success of the immunotherapy. I was prepared to do whatever I could to make it work. That was when I came across a research paper on the link between gut health and immunotherapy. Bingo, this is what I needed. In my mind, this was the key to success or failure. I also devised a plan for the big what if. What if this treatment doesn't work? I wrote this plan down, I set it aside, and I got to work. At times, it took all of my strength and energy to stay focused and to remain on path. With that, I changed my diet, adopting a raw vegan lifestyle. drank fresh cold-pressed juice every day, cut out all meat, dairy, refined sugar, wheat and processed foods, and practiced fasting, especially around my treatment days. I ignored my oncologist's advice and continued with my supplement regime. I focused on healing my body naturally. And through it all, in my mind, I never truly believed that I was sick. Some days, I wanted nothing more than to sit and eat a burger and do nothing, but I wanted to live much more than I wanted that burger. So I stuck to my plan. I didn't know if it was working. I had no idea, but I felt good, so I continued. In January 2023, we planned a trip with some friends to Ballarat. My treatment and my first scan results for this treatment were booked for the same weekend. It was going to either be a really great trip or a really bad one. I was beyond anxious and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Carl held my hand while we sat, waiting for the news. All clear, Ned, no evidence of disease. It was working. The hard work and sacrifice were worth it, and this gave me the reassurance I needed. And needless to say, yes, we had a great weekend, and yes, there was lots of champagne. Once I put the fear aside and took action, I felt strong and determined. Running became my therapy. Every race I finished was a victory over cancer. Those moments of triumph gave me the strength to keep going in the darkest days. When I was asked the question, what can others do to support a loved one during cancer treatment and diagnosis, I had to reflect. And when I look back, I realised the most important thing for me was the encouragement I received and the faith that my family and friends had that I could beat this. My husband had my back every step of the way, and my kids were on my team. My daughter sat with me when I got my head shaved and ran 2 half marathons with me with no training, by the way. My sister stepped in and took care of the kids and supported them. I received daily photos of my niece and nephew from my brother, endless messages of calls and support from my amazing friends, especially Jane, who held my hand during the hard moments, helping me choose a wig, coming with me to get my eyebrows tattooed on. And Daniel and John, who kept my cafe running for me while I was away and always kept me laughing. So many other people in the community who reached out. It was overwhelming at times, and I'll be forever grateful for the support. Today, in this new chapter of my life, I'm very excited to be working at the Euroa gym, where Dan, who I would like to thank for this incredible opportunity, and for his ongoing encouragement and always pushing me in the gym when I felt like quitting. Dan and I have just launched a women's health and wellness program, and this program is designed for women of all ages and abilities, focusing on every aspect of health and fitness. My goal is to help as many women as possible take charge of their health, advocate for themselves, and never stop setting goals. I stand here today not just as a survivor, but as someone who wants to inspire people to take action in their own life. Prioritise your health. Get your screenings. Speak up for yourself. Don't wait for a crisis to make the change. Start today. Start now, and even if it's just a small step, join a gym. Go for a walk. There were some of us that went out in the rain this morning for a walk. Reach out for support and set a new goal. You're stronger than you think, and you have the power to change your story. Thank you to everyone for supporting the Cancer Council and for being part of a community that lifts each other up. Together we can make a difference, one step at a time. Before I finish, I would like to acknowledge anyone here who has been through cancer, going through cancer, or lost a loved one to cancer. I especially want to acknowledge 3 very brave women, Nicole, Odessa and Belinda, who I met through a support group. They started the same treatment with me at the same time, and they were a huge part of my journey. They are no longer with us, but I think of them often and will continue to fight in their honour. Thank you.